Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Yesterday we had another mass shooting here in America. And this mass shooting took place in Pearl Harbor just a few days before the 78th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which led to America entering World War II. And what's really sad about this mass shooting taking place a few days before Pearl Harbor is that most people won't see the great tragedy of the 21st century, most people not being able to connect the dots between this mass shooting which took place at Pearl Harbor and the man crisis that's going on here in America. Now, this mass shooting where 22-year-old George Romero decided to shoot two civilians fits right in line with the pattern and profile I talked about in my book, The Man Crisis. And it seems like the motivation for this 22-year-old sailor to take out a weapon and murder civilians is that he was frustrated about where he was in the military. And this 22-year-old George Romero was angry because of issues he was having in the military, and he didn't know what to do about things. And this is probably what led to him simmering and boiling in anger to the point where he went and he murdered people and then took out his weapon and committed suicide. Because when it comes down to a lot of today's men these days, a lot of today's men, because they have been raised in environments like single mother households, they just don't have the coping skills in order to know how to deal with certain situations. And because a lot of these men are frustrated and angry, they just don't know how to navigate structured environments like the military. And it seemed like this 22-year-old sailor was having a hard time navigating a structured environment like the U.S. Navy, and he was dealing with his anger and was forced to take anger management classes. But those anger management classes, I don't think, were enough to deal with the ticking time bomb this man was, because when men are not raised in a structured environment like a home with a father, oftentimes they just don't have the male life skills or survival skills in order to know how to deal with this thing we call life. And it seems like this young sailor didn't have the life skills he needed, and this is what led to him participating in this shooting at Pearl Harbor. But the great tragedy of this mass shooting is sadly not just the loss of life at Pearl Harbor. It is the fact that most Americans just see it as yet another isolated incident and not another incident in America's ongoing man crisis, because we have a man crisis in this country, and that man crisis is not being acknowledged by people in the mainstream media, because most people in the mainstream media don't want to upset America's women and hold them accountable for the way they have raised their sons over the last 50 years. Because the main reason why so many men are participating in things like mass shootings and a spectrum of violent behaviors is due to the way we are raising boys in this country. And because we are raising boys to be this kinder, gentler, softer male, this male just does not know how to cope or survive in a world where men are expected to behave in a completely different fashion than the way their mothers raised them. And because these boys are taught not to navigate through their emotions or taught male coping skills, male life skills, or male survival skills. These boys simmer and boil in anger, and then when their frustrations reach a climax, what they do is explode in a rage, and then once they explode in that rage, they participate in a spectrum of violent behaviors, varying anywhere from a screaming fit all the way up to a mass shooting, or even in some cases, a mass shooting and a suicide, like in this case. And this is something that people aren't talking about because in the mainstream media, they don't want to talk about the man crisis. But when I take a critical examination of all of these shootings, I can see a pattern emerging as related to the man crisis in this country and how it connects to the way we are raising boys. Now, I believe this young man wanted to enter the military to get some sort of structure in his life. Unfortunately, he was not used to structure, he was not used to male authority, and this could have possibly been the reason why he was having anger issues, because a lot of these men, they are not used to having another man tell them what to do. They're not used to having hard structure from other men, and this can lead to a lot of men having anger issues and anger management issues, like it is speculated that this George Romero was dealing with, and eventually possibly could have led to him getting so angry that he felt like exploding in this rage and murdering these individuals, and then eventually killing himself because he felt like there was no hope for him, and that's why he went off on this rampage. And sadly, when it comes down to this man crisis, everybody doesn't really understand how these events are literally connecting to each other. But I look at this incident, sadly, I see yet another incident in America's ongoing man crisis in this country, something that most people aren't talking about because they just see these shootings as isolated incidents, but they are not isolated incidents. All of these incidents connect with each other, and when you take a critical examination of the pattern of this male behavior that started in the late 1960s and 1970s with the rise of feminism and the rise of the single-parent home and no-fault divorce, we can see how it starts with the social engineering of this kinder, gentler, softer male, and how this softer male just cannot deal with the hard realities of this world. And because they can't deal with the hard realities of this world, that's what's making these men ticking time bombs. And what's scary is we don't know when these men are going to go off or what damage they're going to do when they go off. But that's what has me really scared, because we're sadly seeing more of these incidents transpiring, because just a day after this incident at Pearl Harbor, we had yet another shooting at another naval air station in Pensacola, and this one led to 3 people being dead and multiple injured. And I need more information on that one before I can make a video on that incident. But it looks like the man crisis that has been going on in this country is starting to come into our military. Now, I've done a video on that man crisis in the military as related to the suicides, and now we're starting to see these shootings coming to military bases, which shows me that the man crisis is getting worse in this country, and sadly, we're seeing more and more of this violence continuing to transpire. And until we really acknowledge this man crisis in this country and take a hard critical look at the way mothers raise children, we're not going to really deal with this man crisis in the constructive fashion that it needs to be dealt with. Because when I look at these 2 incidents, they clearly show me that this is part of the man crisis, and this is something that America's military needs to start acknowledging as a man crisis. Because if our men in uniform can't take care of themselves and take care of their mental health, then how can they take care of our country? And this is why we need to invest resources in our men, because if we don't invest resources in our men can't take care of themselves. And if our men can't take care of themselves, then they cannot take care of essential services like serving in our armed forces or protecting our borders and our land. So it's very important that we acknowledge this man crisis, because if our men, again, can't take care of themselves and cannot take care of their mental health, then there is no one there to protect our country in their military service or protect us from the terrorists that want to destroy our country. Because if our people are destroying themselves, then how can they protect us from our enemies who are out to destroy us? If you'd like to learn more about why so many men are frustrated and angry and are possibly ticking time bombs, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle formats, or you can pick it up on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play, and read it on your tablet or your smartphone, and possibly save the life of a man in your life. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.